Welcome your faces back to Pommy and Oz. Hope we're all doing really well. If you're new around here, do me a solid. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe. It really helps the channel out. We've absolutely jettisoned over 5,000, so that is absolutely incredible. And if you want to become a member of the channel, the link is in the description to do that. We've had a few new members as well, so g'day, kia ora, alright to all of them. So today what we're doing is the preview of my team, Carlton. We're facing North Melbourne, Good Friday clash. In around 24 hours time, we're 1 hour, 4 minutes away, 4:20, we will do battle at everyone's favourite secondary home, Marvel Stadium. So, you know, usually when you come into the Marvel Stadium games as a Carlton fan, you're a little bit dubious. I always feel that the Marvel sees the best or the worst of my Blue Boys. North Melbourne, though, this is comfortably their home. They know what it's about. They got a good inkling of how it goes. And, you know, the Blues will look, last time we played, 23 points. The time before that, it was 50 points. So the Blues know that where North are now in their correlation of list building, we are a 4-goal better side. I think that's fair to say. So far this season, what have we learned about these sides? I mean, it feels weird that we're so raw into the season, but I feel like getting a purview of what a side is about is very hard. But North have played the 2 games and they've lost them quite comfortably. GWS is always a tough ask. They absolutely systematically pulled them apart. And then I think the best game for Carlton to watch would probably be the Fremantle defeat at Marvel, which I think showcases where young sides are. Now, I know there's still a fear element, a factor with Carlton. I don't have it, purely because it's not an emotion I feel fear. But I watched that game and, you know, I think Fremantle showed you the problems with North. And I was watching North Melbourne and it gave me real 2017, 2018 Carlton vibes. In the terms of that, for 2 or 3 quarters, they're going to make it very hard. Once that legs go of that young base, and it is a very young base, you could see it start to systematically break down. Tackles were a little bit harder to achieve. And I look at this game and I think that that's going to be North. North are going to get the jump on a side and it's going to be too great a gap because the way that they score, their zip-off halfback, particularly with Fisher and Sheezel, is absolutely splendid. For me, Paul Curtis, we talked about him in the draft quite a lot. One of the more naturally talented players in that forward half of the ground. And when you've got players like Savlaki and you've got players like Cam Zurha, you're always in with a chance. Colby McCurcher is that real reliable ball user, so they're going to be all right in time. And I think they will get jumps on sides. What do we know about Carlton? Carlton have grinded out 2 wins against very solid opposition. Brisbane, absolutely remarkable. I think if you watch the Brisbane game, that is what Carlton are about. And the 2 games we've seen from the Blues is a bit of old with a lot of new. So what I mean by that is a lot of the old stuff we've really been drawn to with Wazze is our ability to break sides down just through sheer hard work and ignorance, really. I mean, my granddad used to say that, son, just because you're born in poverty doesn't mean you can't open doors. All you need is brute strength and ignorance, and the doors will be smashed off their hinges, which I never quite understood as a kid. Was he referring to I was going to be a debt collector? Or if that was a metaphor. I do believe it was a metaphor, but in this case I am being quite physical and real. I think that is Carlton's game style, and I think the new element of what's new is they are bringing it from the back half of the ground. They are now seeking that turnover, which I think is a natural marriage. If you are putting all that much pressure, and if you actually separate Carlton's pressure rating, the front half of the ground has a higher pressure gradient than the back half. That's causing these midfield turnovers, and that's where Carlton are really feasting. And it makes sense when you look at the makeup of our forwards. When Carlton try and go organically, you do see the long ball. You do see that bob into the box, and everyone goes crazy. I've said box, it's not football, it's AFL, so into the 50. You see that big, long Gregor Owen ball in the air, and it gets stifled. Now it's coming with a little bit of pace, which then plays into Charlie and Harry's superior skills of being able to lead and find them avenues. So that is a real reassuring thing. The Richmond game, I feel like you've got to look at that in isolation. one, it's a derby, and every time we've played Richmond, even when we were pish, we stifled the opposition. And I think Richmond basically became Carlton of a former era where they stifled our ball round the centre. And that's okay. If you look at Collingwood, people have found Collingwood out. They don't quite have that secondary bow to draw. Carlton have now with that turnover game. So now what is happening is sides are going to have to go, shit, Carlton can counterpunch. We're going to have to rob Peter to pay Paul. And I don't really fear about the midfield yet. I feel like that Walsh is the missing ingredient anyway, and I think we'll all know that. I think his diversity and the dynamicness of which he has is it. But when I look at this team on paper, Carlton should romp this home by a minimum of 5 goals. And I don't buy into danger game. I don't buy into that. All these games are dangerous. I would say right now, outside of Hawthorn, with respect, and West Coast Eagles, you should be looking at all 16 sides as, you know what, if we don't turn up, they win. And this is where Carlton have got to play the game. So what I'm looking for in this game, ways to win for Carlton, is wear them down. Make them spend their young legs early. If you can do that, Carlton will systematically pull them apart in the back half of the ground. But I want to see some control here. And I used the soccer analogy. Last week was winning 1-0 to Everton. They had 11 men behind the ball. They didn't want to lose. A draw was a win, right? So you've got 2 out of 3 possible results in my football. This week, I'm looking for a 3-0, 4-0 win. I'm looking for a game where I sit down and I watch it, and at no point in time am I ever worried that the result can go any other way than a Carlton win. And North are going to have to counter-press Carlton as well. They're going to know they're going to lose the territory battle. And I think how North have set up under Clarkson is for that reason. They're going to lose the territory battle. They're wanting to get the balls in the hands of Sheasel, Zach Fisher, Colby McCurcher, and then attack. And that's a high-maintenance game style. We saw Carlton in Voss's first year with the back end of the year. Unless you've got the aerobic capacity, and we know Clarkson is a stickler for aerobic capacity with the game systems he plays, that's where you'll always leave the door open. Where Carlton now do look, in my opinion, and I mean this with no bias whatsoever, easily the fittest side when you compare their game style in the league at the moment. So Carlton have got to go out there and do what they do, and I'm looking for a little bit here against a midfield that I think is solid but not great, North Melbourne's, that Carlton need to gain some ascendancy there. We need one of our mids, and I don't usually do this, so for those who've watched me a long time, disposals mean nothing to me. I do want to see a 35 plus from someone here. I want someone to really take the game, control that narrative in the midfield. I'm looking at Cripps here. I'm looking at Cripps to control that narrative in the midfield, to be dishing dimes left, right, and getting his boys in and around, because they don't have the old thugs that they used to have anymore. This is a new style North Melbourne that's just good, hard-working and honest. Carlton, we are becoming the blue-collar Blues. We're going to do it. And you know what? The big thing for me is I don't buy into this beating sides by 80, 90, because unless the AFL say to me, Pom, we're going to give you 5 points for a win if you beat a team by plus 40, I don't care. For me, percentage is always the secondary thing you look for, right? And at the moment, Carlton's percentage, it's still in the 8. Do you know what I mean? It's not great, but it's still in the 8. And then I look at the sides it's played. It hasn't had the luxury of, say, Port Adelaide, who got to play the Eagles, then got to play a very weakened Richmond, having to travel to Port. It hasn't had that luxury. Sorry, Richmond were at home, but it hasn't had that luxury of playing weaker sides in better things. We've played the former finalists, and we've played Richmond, who I think Richmond are always going to do that again in Melbourne against sides with their lineage, because there's still quite a large core of the Richmond old who see these as rivals. And you know what, Richmond, they've got premiership experience. They have some senior heads there. So for me, Carlton have got to go in there and do what they do. So I am looking for being hard at it at the ball. Pull some pressure on that back half of the ground. They want to play football down the back half of the ground. We force them to. We say, go on then, do it. And the turnovers will occur organically. And ultimately, Carlton will prove in this game, for me, that we are a 4-5 goal better side. And these are the games that we've got to go in here and assert our dominance a little bit, which I think we did very well against Brisbane. And I feel like it took us a while, but I do think when I watched that fourth quarter back against Richmond, Carlton asserted their dominance. They basically said to Richmond, look, we're the big dogs now, not you. And it's going to take a bit of a while because we talk about going from being the hunters to the hunted. And Carlton are slowly getting into that hunted category now. People are expecting them to win, even though no one probably had them 2-0. I know I didn't. I can be humble enough to say that. So Carlton go into this game knowing now that they can really put a bit of arm's length. And suddenly, if you look at the ladder, we always say you've got to knock 2 teams out of the 8 and knock a team out of the top 4. Carlton, when they win this game, they will have a 12-point gap, 3-game gap from Collingwood, which would have been in most sides top 4. I think most sides, unless they were being Carlton fans really showing their hatred, I think you would say that. So for Carlton, that's one little bridge crossed by round 3. So for me, it's simple. For North to win, they're going to have to counter-press and keep that ability all the game. Carlton to win, we're looking for that forward pressure, seeing our wingers push up, really get that overload in that front half of the ground, which has been so successful against Brisbane and Richmond in the 4th, and create them dynamic turnovers in midfield, which allow us quick ball entry into the 50 and good looks at goal. And for me, Elijah Hollands is going to be a really great acquisition in here. Jacob Whittaker, we know that a lot of them goals that we conceded, particularly against Richmond in that first half, they don't happen under that. Very excited about Jacob Whittaker coming in because he intercepts but then hits targets very quickly. That's my one issue with Lewis Young, if anything at all, is he takes a mark and it takes him 12 minutes 35 to actually get the ball offloaded. Whittaker, bang, straight into someone's chest, counter away. I think our transition instantly becomes a 3-goal better transition side every game with Jacob there. But Elijah's an interesting one. Who's coming out for that? I think there's 3 players. I think the most obvious one just on output at the moment is Horacio Fantasia. He has been a bit down. I think it's Ringworcester. And a lot of people have asked me, Pom, you didn't drop him. I just don't see the narrative of dropping him. I think if you're bringing Motlop in, maybe 100%. I think yes. But what's Horacio going to learn in VFL? He's already been there and done it. For me, if Carlton are sticking with him, this is the game you stick with him. Let him try and build that confidence up. VFL, I'd rather see the young kids take the mantle. I don't want someone taking over this early in the season. I want the young kids to have that carrot. Other one is Connors. Connors hasn't set the world alight, but he has shown class, and it probably is the natural position. Going back to Horacio, it is interesting Voss deployed him in the midfield at times against Richmond and times against Brisbane, so that helps Elijah out if he comes in for him. But the other one as well is Matt Kennedy, who at the moment, you look at Matt Kennedy, he's almost mirrored Motlop's role last year. And no disrespect to Matt Kennedy, he's an incredible effort-based player. But it just doesn't work because that's not his bread and butter. Is that the area there? Does Elijah come in for Kennedy and be fully blooded in a defined role? Because I feel like that's a defined role. And to give you a little bit of a backstory of Elijah, he was probably one of the first drafts that I really covered at length with Elijah Hollands. And for me, he's a midfield forward. He's that awkward size as well. But one-on-one, for me, in his draft class that year, there was no one better than him. Do you know what I mean? Going back then, there was no one better than him. And he was probably in the category of being a pick 1 that year. Definitely was... His Vic Country before he got injured was sensational. And he also played for them as a bottle and ager, as a pure forward. But it's his impacts per times he gets the ball that really stands out. And following his career at Gold Coast, playing him in the forward half of the ground for me is a waste. He needs to be in the guts. And I do like how Voss has added that to Cunningham's game, to Fantasia's game, playing them on the ball. This will really help. But people do forget this guy here, for someone that is in the 1.9 range. So he's listed at what, 1.9 now, I do believe, from memory. But he was 188 when I covered him, reading his draft profile. The big thing about him is his ability overhead is sensational. And people are talking about that leading from the pocket. When he plays forward for Gold Coast, if you go and watch the finals games he played against our boys, it's really stands out. His ability and his impact overhead. So 189 for me. That is the ticket, because people forget about Jack Martin. That Jack Martin, he ain't 500 meters tall. He's 186, right? So he's a bit taller than Mr. Jack Martin, but he also has that mobility to go in the midfield and that incredible aerobic capacity. My prediction for this game is Carlton by 42. I think Carlton will really show their muscle. I'm really excited about this one. Come and stay tuned. A bit later in the week, we've got Allow Me to Be Frank, a new show where you just have 10 minutes of me ranting or praising something, just with no script, no research, just pure heart. Can't wait for that. Review will come as obviously, but peace, love and light. Pom out.
I see her rolling up, Uber black Cadillac, high heel boots and a sexy body full of tats. Baby's bad.